So thank you all the team, organizing team. I'm going to introduce this short presentation about this TIBER project. So I'm Renato Saleri, I'm a member of the URM MAP research laboratory comprising three teams, the MAP CRE in Nancy, the MAP MAC La Villette, et US MAP ARIA in l'ENSAL de Lyon. We are mainly involved in heritage surveying and 3D modeling strategies for architectural and urban design. So the TIBER project is an extension of the Portus project, the aim of which was to reconstruct the visual aspect of ancient Roman port cities like Portus that you might know, especially if you live in Rome. So this presentation will briefly introduce the importance to invoke high-level strategies to accompany the design process, and will briefly present the Portus project and show how it served as a very useful test bed to imagine the paradigm we would like to develop with the future TIBER project, which is still in construction. I would like also to thank the Portus and TIBER co-workers, Rémi Fabro and Stéphanie Mailleur, who holds a Marie Curie grant from the École Française de Rome and is presently in Rome to support, alongside her own research activities, the continuation of this project. So long before the computers, some peculiar mechanisms have been built to help humans to work or even to pray, like alien harps and Tibetan prayer wheels. A little more than a century ago, some literally masterpieces imagined an impossible library able to contain every possible combination of alphabetical signs on an almost infinite number of 410 pages books. You can read here part of the story from Laswitz, Traumkristalle, served as the basis for the Library of Babel that you might know, a short story by Jorge Luis Borges that he has written shortly after. Please note that this library virtually exists, and you can access it on the internet by typing the address that appears at the bottom of the page. I put to test this principle and search for an interesting content, and I found this short string somewhere here. There is in this alphabetical infinity. This substitution mechanism managed to put some order in the chaos of some pure random machinery, but still it would be impossible to find, for instance, the exact next volume of Harry Potter or the sequel of Game of Thrones, as it will be take trillions of lifetimes to find it out somewhere in this universe of books. Besides this next generator, we could also put to test many other n-dimensional solvers like this 2D solver with the same permutation engine. The time to display all possible solutions lasts even longer than the estimated lifespan of the universe itself. The little red square that you can see indicates, depending on the capacity of the computer, the reaching point of a 1-year computation time. We estimated also the time it would take to fill the whole matrix with white dots, which I barely could mentally imagine how long 45 trillions of years could be. And certainly the computer that supports this experience will be reduced to dust in an infinitesimal portion of this immense amount of time. This will be a very long time to wait for interesting solutions to appear, even because the immense majority of representation will certainly look more like this than this, considering that the original painting took only 3 years to be completed by Leonardo. We presume that there must be a way to speed up this creative process. So we could eventually test this principle also in 3D, but considering the increase of the combinational possibilities and the time it would take to point out interesting architectural configurations, we have to find something much more efficient. Well, beside this task, in this field, some early of the 20th century, some artists and architects tested the unguided power of randomness to produce some interesting 3D objects, known here as architectons, that you all might know. So here the genius of Malevich tested this pseudo-random construction out of wood and plaster during the 20s of the last century. With a computer and with the help of some basic parameters, it's easy today to produce these assemblies, but moreover, they point out a very interesting concept explored by Malevich more than 100 years ago, called apophenia or pareidolia, and which results might be very useful in our domain. For instance, this concept questions very positively the location of the processing software itself. I mean, the mainstream of the generative process is produced by the observer brain, which projects his own interpretative scheme on the scene he sees. And this works also with other senses, like auditory hallucinations, for instance. This affected perception will be very useful when using 3D representations, as we must deal with geometric and decorative simplification to be able to represent possible reality, especially in the case of real-time rendering or handling of complex models or environments, which is the case of this early representation of the Porter's hub, where I did with my colleagues, which is the stands near Rome and created with our generative tools, which look pretty realistic at this distance. But we had to introduce many visual shortcuts to improve the visual efficiency of the whole scene. For short range points of view, the generative paradigm would be slightly different, as you can imagine. As we said before, we explored many strategies to speed up the creative and generative process, like, so long story short, L systems, genetic algorithms, interactive genetic algorithms, and we study today some innovative approaches with deep learning and artificial intelligence techniques. So all these heuristics are meant to accompany the creative process in architecture and urban design, and certainly not are meant to replace it, because we consider that the human is a central character in this process. This is where the TIBER project starts. And so we know how to produce nice images and how to generate credible historical restitution with or without the aid of generative heuristics. But we think there is still a huge gap between architects like us, like me, and computer scientists, 3D graphic designers, and end users like historians and archaeologists. The TIBER project is about the will to transfer the 3D modeling of archaeological restitution at the core of scientific process, which is not every time the case today, as we had the experience of it in the past. In the field of archaeology, the restitution of an ancient urban space requires working with a highly heterogeneous documentary substrate. This often involves the collaboration of different communities who may have words, descriptions, and interpretation of the object or concept being manipulated from very different visual and scientific cultures. This process also requires numerous interactions, both verbal and nonverbal, spoken exchanges, visual demonstration, iconographic or textual comparisons, and arbitration of formal hypotheses. We can thus imagine an ideal circular process of knowledge acquisition progressively enriched by all the successive scientific contribution. But we know that in reality, this is not the case, as we often find ourselves always speaking about architects, computer scientists, and so on, in a situation where the architect, confined to the role of computer graphic designer or even the illustrator, is entrusted with the task of creating only a beautiful image at the end of the line, which may be extremely ambiguous in terms of both its scientific validity and its historical reality. Where the idea, and this, the idea behind the Porter's project, would be to make the archaeological scientific space more accessible to the various scientific communities involved, and in particular to specialists in digital tools, through all the successive scientific contributions. The first phase of Porter's project has produced interesting results through fruitful collaboration between different scientific communities, and in particular with transdisciplinary specialists whose skills in archaeology and computer graphics have enabled scientific technical and methodological links to be forged throughout the whole project. At the other end of the chain, however, communities untrained in 3D model tools, although they often hold the majority of the scientific knowledge required to formalize special hypotheses, might find it difficult to grasp the complexity of using most of the today 3D generative pipelines like the one I depict here in this image. And they would like to be able to use tools that are easy to use and, for example, feature some predefined geometric primitives. So these tools have been already studied and developed within the Porters project. They offer context-sensitive manipulation of predefined primitives, enabling very quick formalization of 3D of restitution hypotheses, drawing on accumulated knowledge. This video has been slightly accelerated, but I think it captures the idea quite well of what we are ongoing. For the moment, there's our laboratory tools under development, but they sketch out a paradigm that has yet to be fully explored, restoring all the important to what architects call often the study model as a working tool, not a rendering model. This is very important, I think. It can be reconfigured at will, and the source of the information used to produce it can be traced. So, but in practice, we realized that even so, these tools, although simplified and profession-oriented, could still be too abstract for some of the communities concerned. And we have therefore decided to reconsider even more the nature of this interaction space by building it on a real flat surface on which we place tangible objects that you can touch that will trigger the appearance on large screen, for example, of that 3D digital doubles. We'd like to enrich the possible levels of interaction between transdisciplinary communities by using then real-world concept objects that enable everyone around the table to carry on exchanges with the same capacity for interaction. On the left, you have the ongoing prototype of the camera, the projector, and the transparent, semi-transparent surface on top. And this project is inspired by the REAACH table, you might know. It's an interactive tool made for live collaborative electronic musical events that you might know if you are familiar with this type of event, which is from the University of Barcelona. It's quite a few years back in time. The system is designed to test new haptic and methodological modalities able to bring real benefit for the construction of several different scientific hypotheses, each of which can retain its own documented hypothesis graph. It could be the interest. And we can imagine an archaeologist manipulating a virtual ink pad, I like this image, to position, reference, and document objects appearing in a 3D virtual space as he moves that 3D plastic interactor over the device translucent surface. So this is my last slide. At this stage of the study, we've been considering the possibility of using maybe Lego bricks to bring to life this 3D interactors with a sufficient level of detail to identify the major classes of architectural forms encountered. And an ongoing partnership is held now with the Planetarium of Vaux-en-Velin and the RSA Cosmos company to build a first immersive experiment under a 16 meters dome here in Lyon. So it's something that might be presented in a near future. So I thank you very much.